They dragged him out of the honors ceremony, saying his badge must have been stolen. But Malik Rhodes wasn't an intruder. He was the valedictorian. The crowd laughed as security pinned him, whispering he didn't look the part. What none of them knew, Malik had proof that could end the principal's career that night, and when he opened his notebook the room went silent. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers that seemed to drip light like molten gold. But beneath the polished surface was a different kind of heat. The low simmer of money, ego, and whispered judgment. It was Sterling Vance's world, and everyone who walked into his gala understood that. The charity banners on the walls proclaimed innovation for tomorrow, but the true spectacle had little to do with science. This was theater, and Sterling Vance loved playing ringmaster. Vance, 56, carried himself with the unshakable arrogance of someone who had never been told no long enough for it to matter. His empire was built on tech monopolies, startup acquisitions, and a network of power that stretched from Silicon Valley to Washington boardrooms. His public image was carefully sculpted: billionaire philanthropist, genius investor, self-made man. But those who looked closely saw the cracks. His comments about meritocracy had gone viral more than once, thinly disguised as truth-telling but dripping with contempt for anyone born without privilege. The man preached that talent always rises, yet everyone in the room knew talent without resources was invisible. Tonight, the gala's stated purpose was raising money for medical research. But whispers had already circulated through the crowd. Sterling was unwell, a degenerative condition, some said. His gait, a little less steady. His grip, a little weaker. Cameras weren't meant to notice, but rumors were currency, and the powerful always traded first. At the far edge of the ballroom, where servers bustled with trays of champagne flutes, Malik Rhodes stood still. 17, thin-framed, shoulders squared more out of determination than comfort. Malik was out of place in every visible way. His suit was pressed but outdated, a thrift store find that hung loose at the wrists. His shoes were polished but scuffed, proof of careful effort rather than luxury. If the room was a stage, Malik was the wrong actor in the wrong costume. And yet his eyes, sharp and searching, carried a weight that silenced doubt for anyone who dared look past the surface. Malik wasn't here for spectacle. He wasn't here to sip from crystal or gawk at chandeliers. He came carrying a battered notebook, filled with formulas and observations he'd pieced together over years, working out of a converted closet in his mother's apartment. His mother, Patrice, worked double shifts at the nursing home. His younger sister, Zora, had been saved once by the very clinic Malik now hoped to fund when her asthma attack Altux took her life. That community clinic had been the only place that cared without first asking for insurance. Malik wanted more than survival for his family. He wanted proof that his mind, his work, had value in a world determined to look past him. But the gala had other plans. Security had already made him feel small before he'd even stepped into the ballroom. They'd scanned his badge twice, called for a supervisor, then asked him if he really belonged here. Meanwhile, others draped in pearls and tuxedos floated in without pause. A pair of donors chuckled as they passed him, muttering about inner-city science projects, as if the phrase itself was a punchline. Malik kept his jaw tight, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Then the moment came. Sterling Vance took the stage. Cameras flashed, capturing the billionaire's tailored tuxedo and practiced smile. He raised a hand, and the room hushed with the obedience of people accustomed to his dominance. Vance began with pleasantries, praising donors, boasting of breakthroughs he'd bankrolled. His voice carried that smooth confidence that made people believe him even when the words were hollow. And then his eyes flicked toward Malik. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance said, his tone dripping with amusement, "I want to recognize tonight's youngest guest. A promising young man who believes he has ideas that could change the world. Isn't that right, Malik?" Every head turned. The spotlight followed. Malik froze under the sudden blaze of attention. His throat tightened, but he nodded. Vance's smile widened, shark-like. "He's told some of my staff that he has solutions even our top researchers haven't cracked. Now I love enthusiasm, but talent must be tested, mustn't it?" The crowd chuckled, a ripple of polite cruelty disguised as encouragement. Then Vance delivered the line that would be replayed across social media by morning. "If you cure me, Malik, I'll give you $1 million. His laugh was smooth, dismissive, the kind that assumed agreement. 1 million. Just like that. Imagine the stories. The room erupted with laughter. Champagne glasses clinking in delight at the absurdity. To them this was comedy. A performance at the expense of the boy in the thrift store suit. The cruelty was casual. Coated in charm, Malik felt the burn of humiliation ripple through him. Every chuckle cutting deeper than the last. But under the sting was something else. Clarity. This was exactly why he had come. Not for approval. Not for applause. But to force the room to see what it had chosen to ignore. His heart pounded, but his voice when it came was steady. I accept. The laughter faltered. The air shifted. The boy who was supposed to shrink had spoken back. Sterling tilted his head, amused and faintly annoyed, as though a pet had misbehaved in public. Malik's eyes didn't leave his. The cameras flashed again, catching the steel in his gaze. But not as a joke, not as entertainment for your donors. If you're serious, then prepare the check. The ballroom stilled. Murmurs cut through the silence, confusion spreading like static. Was this defiance? Was it arrogance? The crowd couldn't tell. What they could tell was that the boy no longer looked like prey. Sterling's smile faltered for just a second before he recovered, chuckling again as though the tension belonged to him. But Malik saw it. The crack in his armor, the momentary flicker of unease. The balance in the room had shifted, and Malik wasn't stepping back. He stepped forward instead, not to plead, not to explain, but to set terms that made even the billionaire pause. The air in the ballroom turned thin after Malik said, "Prepare the check." Laughter had stalled. Cameras hung mid-blink. And for a heartbeat, the chandelier's frost-white light seemed to press down like a question. Malik stood in it, too still, too calm, feeling the stares scrape his skin. Somewhere beyond the velvet rope, a donor whispered, "He's bluffing." The words reached him and kept going, like a pebble skipping across water, and then without moving he was already back home, in the cramped apartment where belief always had to be louder than fear. In Southside mornings the heat came from radiators that rattled like old bones. Patrice Rhodes brewed coffee before dawn, hands raw from the nursing home's disinfectants, humming to make silence feel less hungry. Malik had grown up watching her count bills with her lips moving soundlessly, then look at him and make a smile happen. "You're not the math on this table," she'd say. "You're the part that doesn't fit their numbers." When Zora's asthma flared, it was the free clinic on 87th that kept them breathing as a family. The night Zora turned blue in a cab, her small fingers clawing at air, a volunteer nurse beat the paramedics by minutes and refused payment. Gratitude had felt like owing a debt you could never repay. Malik started keeping track, little tallies in a school notebook of what the clinic needed, and what he would one day give. His lab lived in a closet, a narrow space between a water heater and a leaning tower of cereal boxes. He called it the clean room to tease himself into reverence. Shelves bowed under salvaged equipment. A centrifuge he'd rebuilt from a dorm discard. A spectrometer lens rescued from a dumpster and realigned with dental floss. Glass vials labeled in neat block letters. The neighborhood taught him that broken things weren't trash, just puzzles waiting on patience. Mr. Langley, the retired hospital porter downstairs, clipped him articles from journals he couldn't access, and brought discarded tubing nobody checked. "But I know it's good." Sister Ademi from the church gave him a folding table. The barbers on the corner slipped him tip money for the future scientist. His world wasn't a grant, it was a hand-to-hand economy of faith. School smiled at him without letting him in. When he applied to a regional youth research grant, the panel wrote, "Strong promise, lacks polish." When he asked for lab access at the city college, a coordinator told him, "We have to think about fit." The words were varnished with kindness that smelled like bleach. On a summer afternoon, he sat across from a foundation officer who flicked through his proposal while not looking at him. "We're concerned about your infrastructure," she said, "and community-led studies often stumble on cultural mismatch." He heard the algebra beneath every sentence. Black equals liability, poor equals risk. The rejection letters learned to rhyme. Fit, polish, mismatch, like a chorus rehearsed for maximum deniability. "Wear the bow tie," his friend Rahim urged once, ironing it for him. "Say mentor more, say synergy, say you're excited to learn from leaders." Malik tried, for a while, the soft shoe of code words. He lowered his voice in rooms that liked that. He avoided saying Southside unless someone else said it first. But pandering tasted like ash. "I'm not auditioning to be harmless," he told Rahim, closing the mirror with a snap. "If the science is sound, let it stand." Rahim sighed, knowing the cost of that stand. They're not measuring the science, bro. They're measuring you. The battered notebook showed up after the worst afternoon. A temp nurse at the clinic had slipped him surplus syringes. He'd used them to prototype an insulin stabilizer sleeve that smoothed delivery through heat spikes. Small, simple, working. A local news blog did a profile on the teen tinkerer saving lives. The post trended for a day, then vanished. The editor apologized in a DM. Sponsor pulled their ads. Legal didn't like medical claims. Later, Mr. Langley brought by a crumpled flyer. That's sponsor, he said, tapping the bottom corner where a logo grinned. Subsidiary of Vance Nutritionals. The coincidence sat in Malik's chest like a cold coin. He took a Sharpie and wrote 3 words on a new notebook. Prepare the check. It wasn't a taunt, it was an obituary for permission. Every formula that went inside was a signature on the future that wouldn't ask nicely. Nights in the clean room were not cinematic. They were a boy and a hymn, and the discipline to write everything down. He mapped inflammatory pathways like subway lines, drawing loops where others saw dead ends. He learned the shape of statistical lies by how they tilted graphs to flatter donors. He kept a running list, titled Gatekeeping Techniques, Liability Language, Pilot Purgatory, Proximity Tokenism. On the worst days he read it out loud, and laughed to keep from breaking. Sometimes there was dialogue anyway. Zora would knock on the closet door with a granola bar. Take a break. She'd command. Teenage authority unimpeachable. He'd take the bar and pretend chewing counted as rest. Did you get the grant?
No.
They said fit again. They said it while smiling. You're smarter than their smiles, she'd say. Then retreat, leaving the door open an inch, so he could breathe. It was a small kindness that felt like air. Patrice's counsel carried a different weight. If you need to bend a little, bend, she once told him, rubbing her knuckles like she could rub work out of her bones. The world doesn't always reward the straight back. Malik nodded, then chose the straight back anyway, hating the cost she paid for his spine. What he didn't do was quit. The clinic's donation box held checks written in slow cursive. He'd pick them up, feel their texture, and tell himself this is what debt looks like when it's holy. He started documenting his methods in plain language, as if a future jury would need it. It made the work slower, clearer, stronger. When he realized certain emulsifiers flooded microvascular walls differently in patients on specific supplement stacks, he penciled a box around the observation and circled it 3 times. The note read, "Look where recipes and research kiss." He wasn't naive about the rumors surrounding Sterling Vance's health. Power leaks secrets the way old pipes leak heat. Malik didn't want to build his life on someone else's illness. He wanted the world to stop pretending that only glossy labs could see what was in front of them. Still, when the invitation to the gala landed in his inbox with the clinic's logo on it, 2 seats, courtesy of a donor, he swallowed the insult of junior innovator and printed his badge. Go, Patrice urged. Let them see you. He wore the thrift suit like armor built from thread. At the gala, as security wanded him twice, and a donor joked about inner-city science, Malik cataloged each microcut like data points. Then Sterling called him out. The line, "If you cure me, I'll give you $1 million. Hit like a slap served on a silver tray. Malik steadied himself and felt the notebook's spine through his jacket. He tasted the sponsor who'd pulled ads, the officer who'd smiled mismatch, the blog's vanished praise. Prepare the check, he said, and the room's oxygen thinned. Inside the hush, the machinery of the internet spun up its hunger. A guest clipped the exchange and posted it with a laughing caption. By the time the first charitable laugh finished echoing, the clip had 6,000 views, then 20, then a banner on a gossip site. Teen genius calls billionaire's bluff. Malik's phone began to thrum like a second pulse. DMs arrived stacked, slurs and prayer hands. Venture bros offering mentorship, a pharma recruiter circling with emojis like chum. He put the phone face down and kept his eyes on Sterling. Unpredictability, his and theirs, was the only leverage he owned. Confidence is admirable, Sterling said, returning the room to his cadence, but results are what matter here. Then let results lead, Malik answered, voice stripped of ornament. A donor nearby murmured. He talks well, another replied. For his background, yes. The words were soft, precise instruments, doing harm without leaving a bruise. Malik felt them, catalogued them, stepped over them. An unexpected twist flickered at the edges of his awareness, a pattern resolving in the corner of a page, the sponsor that had strangled his insulin story. The boutique supplements on Sterling's charity table. The way certain ingredients hid behind proprietary blends. He didn't know the whole picture yet, but a shape was forming, and it looked like profit grinning through a lab coat. Raheem texted, "Say you admire him, then land the data." Malik thumbed back, "I won't genuflect for entry." He slid the phone away as if it were part of the act. "You wanted spectacle," he said, not loudly but in a way that found microphones without asking. "I want transparency." Sterling's smile reassembled. "We're aligned then." "We'll see," Malik replied. Behind him, a server paused, recognizing something more than bravado in the boy's tone. As the clip vaulted into the bloodstream of the internet, a familiar blue icon popped onto Malik's screen. A news blogger he hadn't heard from since the insulin piece died. "Proud of you. Careful. Saw ad buys shift within the last hour. Someone's nervous." The message was followed by a screenshot. Vance Nutritionals increasing spend across 3 platforms. Keyword targeting his name. Malik felt the room tilt a degree, suddenly aware of levers bigger than the chandelier's chain. He adjusted his shoulders and met Sterling's eyes, not to win a stare down, but to refuse erasure. "If you're serious," he said, "we do this by protocol." "Protocol," Sterling echoed, savoring the syllables. "We'll be in touch." The gala's applause came late, thin as tissue. Malik stepped away from the microphone, as if walking out of one climate into another. His phone buzzed again, and then a new vibration, short and sharp, the way secure messages announce themselves. On his lock screen, an email subject line bloomed from an address he didn't recognize, routed through an encrypted service he only used with the clinic. "You're right about the blends. Don't trust Halden. Private server. Vance Medical." He stared, pulse climbing, the chandelier shrinking to a bright coin above him. Malik tapped the message open and read the first line. "I work inside Vance's team," as a hand landed lightly on his shoulder from behind. The hand on Malik's shoulder belonged to a woman with camera-ready poise and a lanyard that read Ava Whitmore. Communications. Her smile was the benevolent kind that placed you in a smaller box while complimenting the color of the cardboard. "Let's step where the lighting is kinder," she murmured, steering him toward a velvet-curtained alcove. "We appreciate young voices. We also respect safety." Malik glanced down at his phone, just long enough to catch the first line of the encrypted message. "I work inside Vance's team," and then pocketed it. "Safety is why I'm here," he said. "Excellent," Ava replied, meaning, "be manageable. Our doctors can review your concepts. We'd need a non-disclosure and a background screen first. Nothing unusual. Protects everyone." A security staffer appeared with a clipboard thick enough to be a prop. "Standard forms," he said. Malik skimmed 48 pages of NDA, a rights of assignment clause, and a background authorization that asked for social security, prior addresses, even relatives' names. He looked up. Nearby, a pair of Stanford fellows were waved through to the donor lounge with nothing but a smile and a wristband. "Do they need to sign this too?" Malik asked. Ava's smile thinned. "They're accredited." He felt the word like a velvet hammer. "So am I by my results." "That's not how liability sees you," she said softly, turning the screw with elegance. "You'll find that's a recurring theme." He handed the clipboard back. "Then let's change the theme." Eva didn't flinch. "I admire your confidence. Here's my card. The world loves a good story. Just make sure yours is safe to tell." The rest of the night moved in murmurs and side-eyes. By morning, consequences had put on shoes. The teaching hospital Malik had emailed at dawn, called back by lunch. A coordinator with a voice like polished glass said, "We admire your initiative. Unfortunately, we cannot partner with unaccredited collaborators. Liability exposure. You understand." "What about single-patient investigational use under independent oversight?" Malik asked. "Supervised, reversible, documented. Our board is very sensitive," the coordinator replied. "Given your background." He let the pause hang. "My background?" "Non-traditional," she recovered. "We wish you all the best." He hung up and stared at the wall until the paint became a topography of no. The city research office managed to say less while demanding more. When he filed a request for a temporary permit to process de-identified biomarkers off-site, essentially a paper shield to do what he'd already done safely, they slid a packet back across the counter. "Additional review," the clerk said, tapping a box labeled enhanced screening. "We need fingerprints, a background check, references, and proof of institutional affiliation." Malik watched a young white founder in a bomber jacket approach the next window with a smile and a brochure from a venture incubator. He walked out 10 minutes later with a provisional approval and a selfie of himself holding it. Malik lifted the enhanced screening packet again. The bottom page asked a final question in 10-point font. Are you currently the subject of any investigation, including juvenile proceedings? He marked no and tried not taste the insult. By late afternoon, the local news had found its angle. A segment aired under a chirpy lower third. Audacious upstart. Teen takes on tech titan. They used B-roll of Malik walking between the gala tables, thrift suit in sharp focus, while a voiceover framed his claim as swagger. When Malik's on-camera quote ran, "We do this by protocol," the anchor chuckled. Confident, right? The piece closed with a soundbite from Dr. Pierce Halden. "We welcome enthusiasm, but medicine is not a game." The segment edited out everything Malik said about gatekeeping, about community clinics, about safety designed with the patient instead of around him. He called the producer and got only a voicemail tree. Then the call came from a line producer who didn't want to be on record. "Name's Cam," she said, voice lowered, the kind of whisper you use when walls have ears. "You got sandbagged. They cut the substantive parts." "Why?" Malik asked, though he already knew. "Because donors buy airtime," she answered. "And because the narrative sells easier if you're a personality, not a problem they helped build." A pause, then a softer confession. "I pushed for your data to lead. I lost. Meet me around the corner 2 blocks down. I've got raw footage on a drive. Your quote's untouched. If you publish, blur my name. Protect yourself first." She hung up. An hour later, in the back booth of a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and ink, Cam slid him a small black USB. No handshake, no smile, just a warning. "They'll offer you a safe path. It won't be your path." "Are you with Vance?" he asked, suddenly unsure which direction the currents moved. "I'm with the truth on a good day," she said. "On most days I'm just employed." Then she was gone, leaving him with a drive and a rising understanding that the broadcast had been a mirror tilted to flatter someone else. Back home, the clean room hummed like it always had. On the folding table, Malik stacked his prototypes in a neat still life. The low-cost biomarker assay, laser-printed housings, reagents stabilized with a recipe he'd tested 100 times, a 1-page instruction sheet written in plain English, a binder of culturally adapted consent forms that replaced legalese with clarity and included a section titled "Control Your No" in bold. He'd designed them after watching a nurse hand Patrice a form thick with clauses that made help feel like a trap. None of it fit the grant categories. "We don't fund tools," one foundation had said. "We fund breakthroughs." The irony made him laugh in the quiet, a sharp sound that startled even him. The next day, an intermediary slid into his DMs with a smile made of venture jargon. Ephraim Cole, health tech catalyst. They met in a glass conference room, perched above a lobby waterfall. "Here's the thing," Ephraim said, elbows on the table. "We love your hustle. You need institutional protection and polish. We can get you in the right rooms. We'll do a $25K evaluation grant, plus mentorship. In exchange, you assign provisional rights to the IP, so we can negotiate on your behalf. So I give you the keys," Malik said, "and maybe you let me keep the car's name." "It's standard," Ephraim assured him. "We make difficult founders easy to fund." "Difficult?" Malik asked, more curious than hurt. "You've got convictions," Ephraim said. "Investors want pliability. We'll coach you on tone. Maybe drop the prepare the check thing. It reads antagonistic." "It reads like a promise," Malik said. "And I'm not for sale." Ephraim leaned back, the smile cooling. "Careful. This community is small. People talk." "They've been talking my whole life," Malik answered, standing. "I'm just deciding I'm not the part of the conversation that apologizes." On his way out, the receptionist handed him a non-disclosure just to read. Page 3 contained a clause assigning derivative concepts, conceived during informal consultation. He left it on the counter like a forgotten menu. That afternoon, the hospital that had begged off for liability sent him a follow-up. "We could reconsider if a senior investigator agrees to supervise as primary. We'd list you as support personnel. You'd get access to our lab." The senior investigator attached, a man who'd once told Malik, at a science fair, "You're articulate. Have you considered communications?" The email ended with, "Your community consent forms are interesting, but our IRB prefers traditional templates." Malik imagined his work stripped for parts and handed back with a new label. He typed 3 sentences and deleted them. Then wrote 2 more. Thank you for your time. I will pursue independent oversight. He hit send. The ache in his chest wasn't pride. It was the cost of not letting someone else narrate his mind. By evening, the clip from the gala had traveled farther than the truth. He fielded waves of DMs. Some blessings. More bile. One message stood out because of its precision. Have you consented to a comprehensive background screen yet? If not, don't. It came from a burner address with no history, then vanished. The timing rattled him. When the city emailed to say his permit request would require additional review due to community impact, he called the desk. A new clerk answered. We need to ensure you're not exposing vulnerable populations to harm, she recited. I'm trying to protect them, he said, and I'm proposing one patient, Mr. Vance. High-profile subjects increase our risk, she replied. Also, we'll need a letter of consent from a parent or guardian. I'm 17, he said. Not the patient. Oh, the clerk said, flat as a screen. Policy's policy. He dropped the phone into his pocket and stood very still. The room in front of him appeared like a split screen. On one side, glossy labs shaking hands with glossy money. On the other, a boy in a closet counting vials. He didn't want to hate the first screen, but he refused to pretend the second didn't exist. A ping. The encrypted thread again. You're being slowed on purpose. The first message repeated itself as if for emphasis. They'll insist on NDAs that let them own your failure. Do not sign anything from Halden's office. Another message stacked on top of it. The subject line empty. The body a single sentence. If you want proof I'm not a troll, check the supplement table photo from the gala. Bottom shelf, second row from the right. Malik pulled up a donor's Instagram carousel. There it was. A pyramid of wellness bottles, arranged with the care of an altar. Bottom shelf, second row, a white label with a corporate parent listed in 6-point type. He zoomed until the pixels blurred and read the line twice. The subsidiary name matched the sponsor that had pulled ads and suffocated his insulin story. The floor seemed to tilt, not because he didn't expect it, but because seeing the pattern arc into a circle is different from guessing that it would. He breathed through the rush of anger and typed back, fingers steady. Who are you? The reply came quick enough to feel like a heartbeat. Someone who watched a test get designed to make you fail. Do you want to change the variable? A pause, then another message. Longer this time. Come alone. No phones, no recordings. Tonight 10 p.m. Gate E. Service Road off Gossamer Lane. If you bring anyone, I'll know. If you sign anything before then, you'll regret it. Malik stared at the address and felt the city inside the name. Gossamer Lane, like a joke about fragility. He opened a map. The pin dropped inside the outer boundary of Sterling Vance's estate. A service gate where deliveries came, and men in black jackets checked clipboards without looking up. He looked at the clock, then at the raw footage drive on his desk, then at the notebook with "Prepare the check" on its cover. Somewhere across town, a PR director was crafting a statement about safety. A doctor was preparing paperwork that called his mind a risk, and a city office was deciding how to move his application into a folder labeled delay. He picked up his jacket. The lamplight caught the faint scuffs on his shoes and made them look for a second like armor. The encrypted sender's final ping arrived. As he reached the door, Gate E, come alone, and below the signature a name blinked into view for half a second, before disappearing, Pierce H. The service road off Gossamer Lane was quiet enough to hear the tires crackle over gravel. Malik killed his phone and slid it under the seat, the night air pressing cold against his face. As he stepped out, Gate E loomed ahead. Industrial steel softened by tasteful landscaping. Cameras like blinking insects stitched along the fence line. The illuminated plaque read Vance Reserve, in a serif that made wealth look inevitable. He felt small for a beat, then reminded himself small wasn't the same as wrong. A guard in a dark jacket appeared with a tablet. Name: Malik Rhodes. The guard checked the screen, paused. You're late. It's 9. A humorless half smile. Inside, the gate side open. Beyond it, the estate unfurled like an argument for hierarchy. Glass corridors floating above shallow pools. Hedges clipped to the discipline of a metronome. Lighting that made marble glow without casting shadows. Every sightline implied that someone else had the right to see you first. Malik walked under a paneled overhang, his reflection splitting into fragments across the glass. A woman waited where the path met the front portico. She was the same one from the gala, though the lanyard was gone tonight. Ava Whitmore, she said, extending a hand he didn't take. Communication. You sent the message? Malik asked. Her eyes flicked to a camera dome above them. We don't discuss security channels on the porch. The smile didn't move. Come on. Inside, the temperature shifted to museum cool. A long gallery stretched away, flanked by glass cases and canvases. A giant abstract black field, violent white arcs, hung opposite a photograph of a 1960s hospital corridor. Two black porters blurred mid-step behind a surgeon in crisp focus. A plaque credited the photographer, the hospital, the curator. No names for the men in the background. The omission lay like a thumb on a bruise. Malik slowed, reading the wall more than the word. Sterling collects, Ava said, half glance over her shoulder. He believes in elevating voices. Malik studied a Kerry James Marshall print, exquisitely hung under lights designed to impress donors. Does he elevate people? Ava didn't answer. Instead, she palmed open a door that scanned her fingerprint and iris in a wash of blue light. Biometrics, she chirped. Welcome to the reserve. They moved into a glass corridor that bridged two courtyards, koi drifting underfoot like expensive thoughts. Malik's thrift suit reflected back at him, sleeves slightly long, collar too stiff. Architecture, he realized, was one long sentence about who belonged. This sentence kept positioning him as a footnote. A man waited at the end of the corridor, tall, silvering hair, a lab coat pressed with military precision. He had the face of a person used to being the last word. Dr. Pierce Halden, he said, grip cool, smile calibrated. We meet at last. Malik kept his voice neutral. I received a message. From me? Halden's eyebrows lifted in polite surprise. Security reaches out. I practice medicine. A strange chill ran through Malik. The encrypted signature, the flash of Pierce H, tugged at the edge of his memory like a thread that might be looped to a trap. Halden pivoted before Malik could answer, adopting an avuncular tone meant to diffuse. Walk with me. I want to hear about you, in your own words. They stepped into a clinical wing, softened by wellness branding. Wood slats, eucalyptus in the vents, a hush that felt curated. A medcart waited by a wall of refrigerated cabinets, labeled private stacks, Vance in discreet font. Halden began to narrate without turning his head. A tour guide for the skeptical. Born and raised, South Side, he said, as if reading a brochure. Self-taught bioengineering, community clinic volunteer, DIY assays. He smiled. Ambition's not your problem. It's not an illness, Malik said. Neither is naivete, Halden countered, and kept walking. We respect initiative. We also respect protocols. Provenance matters. When you operate outside institutions, you miss the accountability that keeps patients safe. I document everything, Malik said, better than the broadcast that chopped my words to fit a narrative. Broadcasts flatter and flatten. Halden agreed easily. You'll find we dislike shortcuts here. They reached a small conference space, where a glass wall overlooked a minimalist gym. On a sideboard, a line of supplements gleamed, all white labels and serif fonts, the kind of packaging that sold purity at a markup. Malik drifted there, reading, while Halden continued. We reviewed your insulin stabilizer, Halden said. Clever. Not scalable in its current form. You mean not patentable, Malik said. Halden's teeth showed. We mean safe for mass populations. Ava reappeared with a tablet and set it down in front of Malik. Before we discuss further, we'll need you to sign a standard NDA, just to protect everyone's interests. And media coaching, she added lightly, sliding a second screen forward, so you don't get misquoted again, or so I don't say something you can't control. Malik asked. Ava's smile remained the same size, but moved an inch further away. Control is a loaded word, Malik. We prefer alignment. He turned back to the supplements. Ingredient lists in tiny type: quercetin, resveratrol, curcumin, then a proprietary blend with an emulsifier. He recognized from his notes. A second bottle listed a beta-agonist variant, used off-label in some experimental stacks. A third boasted next-gen Delivin technology without disclosing the carrier. These contradict published protocols for the condition you're treating, Malik said quietly, layering stimulants over microvascular stressors. Halden's face expressed polite curiosity. Is what? Like painting over mold, Malik said. Looks better, gets worse. Ava tapped her pen. Let's not diagnose on site. Malik glanced at the medcart. A laminated sheet lay there. Daily, AM PM, Vance. Boxes checked in neat lines. a faint coffee ring like a human footprint. He looked back at Halden. Who designs the stacks? The team, Halden said. We adjust constantly. Bio-individuality is a science, or a loophole to do what you want without accountability, Malik replied. Language, Eva cooed. Remember, alignment. Malik traced a finger over the corner of the laminated sheet, not touching it, just feeling the pressure of what it implied. He thought of the gala's supplement table, the quiet way ad buys had shifted, the sponsor that had suffocated his insulin story. Here, the circle felt complete in a way that made his stomach go cold. Why am I here? He asked. If you already decided I'm a problem to be managed. Eva folded her hands. Because a narrative is forming with your name in it. We can help you not get crushed by it. Or you can fold me into it, Malik said, and call the iron velvet. Halden exhaled through his nose. Friendliness on a dimmer. You want to help? Then help. List your concerns. We'll vet them. If anything holds up, we'll credit your contribution. You'll list me as support personnel, Malik said, refusing the bait. Holden's eyes flicked to the med cart, then back. You can be part of a solution, or you can be noise. Up to you. Something heavy moved under the conversation. An undertow of decisions already made. Malik looked through the glass wall into the gym. A figure was there, Sterling Vance moving slow on a treadmill. Gait slightly uneven, a towel thrown over the bars like a flag of truce. Cameras were mounted high in the corners, their lenses dark. Vance glanced up as if he felt the observation and smiled with the easy confidence of a man who owned the air above his head. He stepped off the treadmill and entered the conference space with a towel around his neck. Young Mr. Rhodes, he said, his voice honeyed, welcome to my home. It was your Gates idea, Malik said. Everything here is my idea, Vance replied, not as a correction but as a creed. He offered his hand. Malik let the silence hold it in the air, and then let it fall. Vance chuckled, unbothered. A spine. Good. We like spines. Keep science upright. You like control, Malik said. I like clarity. Vance's eyes lit with amusement. Then you'll enjoy what comes next. He nodded toward the sideboard. The stacks confuse you. They contradict best practice, Malik answered. Best practice is written by committees who have never bled for their conclusions, Vance said. I'm a data point with a bank account. We try things. We learn. That's progress. At other people's expense, Malik said. Vance tilted his head. Are you other people? You came to cure me. I came to stop a bad test, Malik said. Halden stepped forward. Soothing. No one is testing anything tonight. He's here to observe. Ava slid the NDA closer. Then sign. So we can keep everyone safe. Malik met Vance's eyes. Safe for whom? Safe for the story, Vance said. Which is what we are all in. An unexpected twist cut through the choreography. A small green light blinked on the glass wall, and Malik caught a reflection behind Halden, on the far workstation. A screen woke with a login already active, Halden P running across the top, but the cursor moved without his hands on any keyboard. Someone else was typing, somewhere else on the network, on Halden's credentials. The monitor flashed a secure messaging pane. 3 words appeared like a dare. Gate E confirmed. Malik felt the floor tilt. The message that lured him here had come from inside Halden's access, but the hands on the keys weren't Halden's. He looked at Ava. She smiled with her eyes, and nothing else. Vance followed his glance to the screen, then back. We are all very busy, he said mildly. Let's not chase ghosts. Malik didn't move toward the NDA. The room hung between choices. He thought of Patrice's raw hands, Zora's open door, the clinic's donation box, Cam's whispered warning. He thought of the photograph in the hall where the black men had no names. Vance broke the spell with a clap soft enough to pass as a gesture. Let's settle this elegantly, he said. You think we're painting over mold. We think you're a talented boy with more conviction than context. So, tomorrow, we host a small demonstration. Closed door. Select donors. 2 independent observers. No media. You observe. You annotate. You suggest modifications in real time. If your notes have merit, we'll implement. If not, you will have learned something about the weight of other people's bodies. He smiled. Halden added smooth as oil. We design the parameters, of course. Safety first. Ava's pen tapped twice. Decision disguised as rhythm. Media coaching, still recommended. I'm not a prop, Malik said. Everyone is a prop, Vance replied lightly. Some of us choose our stage. Malik looked at the MDA. The glass corridor beyond reflected him back in fragments. Luxury had arranged itself into a mirror designed to make him smaller. He stood anyway, shoulders squared because that's what his body knew how to do when the room asked it to fold. What time? He asked. Vance's smile widened by a degree that cameras love. 8 a.m. We're something the donors can trust. Halden's hand hovered over the med cart, checking a box on the laminated sheet, with casual authority. The pen left a faint creak in the quiet. As Malik turned to leave, a door slid open at the end of the corridor, and an orderly wheeled in a tray of fresh bottles, new labels, same parent company. One carried a warning sticker he'd never seen in consumer stacks. For trial use only. Vance's eyes flicked to it, then to Malik, as if sharing a secret law. This was the demo, and the rules would belong to the house. The next morning, the reserve felt less like an estate, and more like a stage set. The glass corridors gleamed sharper under daylight, koi drifting in a slow choreography beneath his feet, while the hush of the place seemed more pronounced, as though silence itself was rehearsed. Malik had not slept. His mind was a churn of formulas, suspicion, and the lingering glow of the encrypted message, but exhaustion sharpened him more than dulled. If they wanted a spectacle, they would get one. The only question was whose script would survive. He entered the demonstration chamber through double doors that whispered open at his approach. The space resembled a cross between an auditorium and a surgical theater. Tiers of donor seating, white leather chairs arranged in a semicircle, a central platform under warm spotlight. Monitors lined the walls, already glowing with charts and half-loaded datasets. He saw them for what they were, not science but props designed to simulate rigor for those who couldn't read beyond the axis. The audience filed in, wealth whispering wealth, watches that cost more than his mother's annual salary, shoes that never touched cracked sidewalks. Physicians mingled with donors, their badges reading consultant in embossed font. A woman in a slate suit leaned close to a colleague and murmured, "Affirmative action science, straight from the closet lab." The man chuckled, shaking his head. Malik didn't react, but he let the words etch themselves into the ledger he kept inside, one insult per line. At the center, Dr. Halden orchestrated with the air of a conductor. "This morning we'll run a focused protocol," he announced. "Mr. Rhodes will observe, perhaps even annotate. We encourage learning opportunities." The phrasing was deliberate. Malik was an intern in their script, not an equal. Ava stood to the side with her tablet, poised to translate every moment into messaging. The protocol began, but the trap was already visible. Baseline vitals? Withheld. Observation window. Cut from hours to 30 minutes. Supplement stack. Adjusted labels taped over. Ingredients switched. Reagents replaced with lookalikes. Malik saw the substitutions instantly. One solvent's tint was a shade off. The vial next too new for a study supposedly ongoing. They had no intention of producing data, only the theater of dismissal. "Shall we begin?" Halden gestured grandly toward Malik, then toward the donors. Perhaps our young guest would like to demonstrate his method. The tone balanced amusement and threat. A boy about to juggle knives for their entertainment. Malik stepped forward slowly, eyes scanning the table. "If I may," he said. Voice measured. "Protocol requires baseline before intervention. Otherwise, observation lacks meaning." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the donors. Like a cue card reading, "Amused." A man in a bow tie raised his glass. "He wants rules in jazz," he said. "Adorable." Holden smiled. That thin curve of authority. Sometimes science must adapt to circumstance. Improvisation, as our guest says. Malik's jaw tightened. He could refuse and look small. He could play along and be dismissed. Instead, he reached for what he always carried, restraint. He turned to the monitors. Vance sat reclined at center, arm resting on the chair, his tremor faint but visible. Malik noted the pattern, subtle rhythmic twitching, worsening in 20-minute arcs, correlating not with fatigue, but with ingestion, time to supplement cycles. It was a detail hiding in plain sight, but only if one believed a boy from the south side could read the body as data. "Observation," Malik said, voice clear. "Tremor intensifies not randomly, but rhythmically, likely linked to microvascular inflammation. Pattern correlates with dietary emulsifiers and stimulant adjuncts, layered in the stack." Halden's eyebrows lifted, half feigned, half real. "Strong words without proof." "Proof is reversible," Malik replied. He pulled from his pocket a small LED strip, jury-rigged into a handheld scanner, a tool he had refined in the clean room. He spoke as he set it down. Laser speckle contrast imaging, safe, non-invasive, measures microvascular blood flow in skin. Watch the change. He gestured to Vance. 5 minutes pre-ingestion, 5 minutes post. Document, compare. The room tensed. Halden moved quickly. Unscheduled interventions are not permitted. But Vance, intrigued by the audacity, raised a hand. Let him. Curiosity never killed progress. He leaned back, amused. The donors leaned forward, eager for sport. Malik steadied the strip against the table and directed it at Vance's hand. The scanner glowed, projecting patterns onto the monitor. He spoke in short sentences, his rhythm steady, baseline recorded, pulse regular, flow consistent, introducing supplement. Halden's staff handed over a white bottle, label disguised. Malik's eyes narrowed, proprietary blend, the same emulsifier hidden at the gala table. He said nothing, only nodded. Vance swallowed, cameras clicking as though this were theater. 5 minutes passed. Malik pointed again. The scan shifted, speckle patterns tightening, flow constricting. There, Malik said, voice low but unshakable. Constriction measurable, tremor intensifies. He turned to the room. Correlation visible. This is not treatment. It's trigger. Silence, sharper than laughter. Donors glanced at one another, uncertainty spreading like a draft. A woman in the front row murmured. He saw it. A physician muttered. Coincidence. Another coughed. Selective data. The room was splitting, ridicule fracturing into reluctant recognition. Cameras, too, had shifted. The official crew, stationed by Ava, had aimed their lenses at Malik, only when he blinked or fumbled with equipment, capturing angles of uncertainty. But one independent observer, a woman Malik hadn't seen before, sharp-eyed, notebook balanced on her knee, lifted her phone discreetly and recorded the monitor itself. Not Malik's hands, not his thrift suit. The data. Malik caught her gaze for a second. She gave nothing away. Halden clapped once, briskly. Interesting parlor trick. Hardly rigorous. An entirely outside protocol. His smile was the mask of dismissal. Security. 2 men in black jackets stepped from the wings, moving toward Malik with efficient strides. The donors relaxed, reassured by the return of order. Laughter resumed, polite and cooling. He had his chance, someone whispered. Affirmative action entertainment. Vance watched, expression unreadable. As the guards approached, Malik stood his ground, the LED strip still glowing faintly on the table. He didn't move, didn't protest. He only said, "You can silence me. You can't silence the pattern. It's in your own data, hiding, because you won't look." Halden's smile thinned further. "Escorting for protocol breach," he said smoothly, as if the decision were neutral fact. The guards closed in, their hands hovering near Malik's elbows. Vance raised a finger lazily, halting them not in Malik's defense, but with a grin that suggested something far stranger. "Not yet. Let's see what the boy does under pressure." The guards hovered at Malik's shoulders like punctuation marks, waiting to turn his presence into an exit, but Vance's raised finger held them in grammar. Laughter swirled back through the donor seats, as if someone had turned on a fan. Halden allowed it a few beats, then folded his hands with priestly calm. "Thank you for your enthusiasm," he said, each syllable trimmed to fit his authority. "We'll debrief internally. For now, we need to reset the room." Ava stepped close enough for her perfume to eclipse the antiseptic. "Media coaching," she murmured, slipping a card into Malik's open notebook with a practiced flick. "Call when you're ready to be effective." Vance's grin flashed like a blade under velvet. "Pressure clarifies," he said, already turning away. "Some people flake, some crystallize." Security moved then, gentle but final, steering Malik toward the doors while their palms hovered just shy of contact. He let himself be ushered through the glass corridor, koi sliding in slow commas under his feet, the estate's design reasserting the size it preferred him to be. Outside, the winter air snapped his lungs to attention. He switched his phone back on, watched notifications crowd the screen, and slid it into his pocket before the noise could colonize his focus. The buzz returned at once, a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it pass. Then a text short and precise. "You weren't wrong about the speckle contrast. The constriction is textbook. I've seen it buried." A second message. "If you want rigor instead of theater, meet me where rigor still lives." a link to a location pinned at the edge of a light industrial district. He called. A woman answered on the second ring. Rhodes. Yes. Naomi Ellison, she said. Immunology, formerly of Westlake, and once Vance's favorite partner. I watched the donor stream. Your scanner wasn't a trick. Come now, before the story hardens without you. Why me? He asked. Suspicion an old friend who kept him safe. Because you observed what they were paid not to see, she said. And because I recognized the sound a door makes when it's slammed. And you need a window. The warehouse sat between a tire shop and a signage printer, its brick skin tagged with careful graffiti that felt more blessing than vandalism. Inside, the air carried a faint citrus bite from disinfectant and the low hum of machines that had been nursed into usefulness. This wasn't prestige, it was precision built from second chances. Naomi met him in the vestibule. Lab coat cinched, curls pinned back, eyes like searchlights that did not blink for power. You're younger than I expected, she said, not unkindly. I am exactly as old as they allow me to be, he answered, and her mouth tipped at one corner. Good, she said. Come see the exile. Her lab was a geometry of workarounds. Stainless tables on casters. A gently wheezing incubator with a sticker that read, Donated by Next Door Deli. A refurbished laminar flow hood with a handwritten SOP taped to its side. Pipettes nested in 3D printed holders, stamped Harrison Library Makerspace. On the far wall, a whiteboard carried a heading in block letters. Assume scrutiny. Under it, time-stamped checklists, chain of custody templates, a line that read paper and prayer before people. The rigor was visible, the humility intentional. You were at Westlake, Malik said, tracing his finger an inch from the SOPs. I read your paper on microglial activation in chronic inflammatory load. They preferred that version of me, she replied. The version who said what was safe to say. She gestured him to a stool. Tea or black coffee? That's the extent of our luxury. Coffee. He took the mug, inhaled its honesty. I told the FDA that a vendor's delivery technology amplified adverse events in certain populations. She continued, stirring sugar into her own. The vendor said noise. The hospital said partnership. I said harm. Guess who remained employed? Vendor? He asked, pulse finding a new rhythm. I'm not saying names until we lawyer up, she said, eyes ticking toward a locked file cabinet. But I read the emulsifier in that bottle, with my eyes closed. When your speckle contrast shifted, I felt 40 depositions wake up in my bones. He set his mug down. Help me build something they can't dismiss. I'll help you build something that doesn't hurt, she said. And we'll log it like a court record. They moved through the lab in tandem. Naomi opened a fresh binder and wrote on the spine, VRSPI, Single Patient Investigational Use, Vance. She handed him a pen. We document in ink, she said, and we assume someone hostile is reading over our shoulder. The first page read Protocol 0. They built from the bones of what Malik had already done. Establish an untouched baseline. Stage an eliminating diet focused on probable triggers. Remove the proprietary blends. Measure microvascular flow pre- and post-ingestion, across identical intervals. Employ a reversible low-risk anti-inflammatory adjunct at microdose. Designate emergency stop criteria. List confounders. Assign roles. You're primary on pattern recognition, Naomi said. Her cadence clipped and clean. I'm primary on immune response. No unsupervised changes. No undocumented hands. Chain of custody for every vial. Every tablet. Every yes. And consent, Malik said, reaching into his backpack. He pulled out his plain language forms, the ones whose headings were more human than legal. What are we doing? Your choices. Control your no. He spread them under her lamp. She read, then nodded once. A scientist's praise. Keep this. We'll ask a different kind of board to test the language. Their IRB did not sit in a glass tower. It lived where the city did its truth work. Naomi sent 3 texts. Within the hour, they were at the barber shop on 63rd, folding chairs pulled into a circle beneath a poster of a boxing legend. Miss Langley shuffled in with a clipboard. 2 neighborhood nurses from the clinic, Carol and Luz, arrived with a thermos and pens. Pastor Leon from the church set his hat on his knee and nodded the room to attention. Naomi explained without selling. Malik laid the forms on the counter beside the clippers. Carol tapped a paragraph and said, Luz subject, say person. Luz crossed out a block of legalese. and wrote, "If you change your mind, we stop. No question." Pastor Leon read the "Control Your No" section out loud, and added, "Make the font bigger." Mr. Langley underlined the emergency contact line twice, and said, "Put clinic number, not just." "Looks like church bulletins," Pastor Leon said when they were done. "Good," Malik replied. Church bulletins kept Zora alive. Back at the warehouse, they drafted a letter to Vance, offering a single-patient investigational pathway, with independent oversight, and a public ledger of steps. They attached the protocol, the consent language, the plan for 2 neutral observers. Naomi added her CV, with the line "resigned for ethical concerns" unhidden. Like a scar turned into a story, Malik hesitated over the send button, then tapped it. The letter went. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. What did not wait was the systemic rebuttal. Naomi requested de-identified microvascular data from Vance's insurer routine. When risk demanded clarity, a compliance officer replied in under an hour. "Due to security considerations, and to protect proprietary elements of our client's wellness regimen, we cannot share datasets with unaccredited parties." The sentence ended without a period, as if even punctuation had been denied. 2 hours later, the same insurer issued a press release, celebrating a data partnership with a venture-backed startup. White founders, glossy headshots, working on AI for inflammatory prediction. Naomi slid her laptop across the table. "I've sat on both sides of this firewall," she said. "The password is always the same. Not for you." Malik called the compliance officer anyway. "I'm asking for anonymized data to increase safety for one patient," he said. "We're not selling, not boasting. We're trying to save a body." "I appreciate your passion," the officer replied, voice wreathed in training. "However, our governance policies require institutional partnership." "You partnered with a company younger than me," Malik said. "They have alignment," the officer answered. "Of skin?" he asked before he could stop himself. "Of process," she said quickly. "Thank you for your call." He hung up and pressed his palms flat on the cold steel bench until the anger cooled enough to move without spilling. Naomi watched him, then handed over a clipboard. "Write the refusal into the record," she said. "The omission will be evidence later." They worked without theatrics. Malik recalibrated his LED strip under Naomi's microscope. Naomi adjusted the adjunct dose down 1 gradient. They printed labels in duplicate and placed them into zip bags with tamper seals. Cam, the line producer who had slipped him raw footage, arrived through the loading dock under a hoodie, handed them a thumb drive, and nodded toward the parking lot. "Donor stream replay," she said. 20 minutes uncensored before PR took over. Also a contact at the state board. Off the record, but she hates being lied to. "Why are you risking this?" Naomi asked. "Because I like my job," Cam said, grin quick as a match. "And because if this goes the way I think, I'd like to keep a soul to go with it." They didn't hug her. They logged the provenance of the files, signed the chain of custody sheet, and backed up to 2 drives, one for air-gapped storage, one for the ledger. The ritual didn't harden the truth. It made a container for it. Night deepened into the ribs of the building. The tire shop closed. The signage printer flicked off its neon. Naomi refilled the kettle. "You understand the moral math?" she asked, not looking up. "If this works, you enable a man who profits off inequity. If it fails, they'll say your audacity hurt him." "I understand that the body is not a brand," Malik said, "and that I won't be his prop." She nodded. "Then the compromise is this. We cure the body if we can, and we make the sickness around it visible." The warehouse motion light clicked on by the loading dock, then off, then on again. 3 slow pulses, like a heartbeat, remembering itself. Malik set his mug down and walked to the door. A padded envelope lay against the jamb, anonymous brown against gray concrete. No footsteps, no car door, just the smell of cold cardboard and a strip of tape scored by a fingernail. Naomi joined him. "Don't touch," she said. She snapped gloves on, lifted the envelope into the lab, set it under the lamp, and slit the seam. Inside, a spiral-bound stack of printouts, corners stapled, edges crisp. The cover sheet, Vance Personal Regimen, dosing logs. A subtitle, Internal, not for external distribution. Below in neat sans serif, a list of dates and checkboxes, and initials, Halden's signature on some other signatures coded. Ingredients listed in codes that matched nothing public. Naomi flipped to a random page and exhaled through her teeth. Their reports to the board say 10-minute intervals, she murmured. These logs show 30. They listed a stimulant as a placebo in 3 separate entries. And look, here emulsifier batch B32, marked off-label. Then consider for staff evaluation. Malik leaned in. The line item quivered in the lamplight, as if it knew it was a fuse. Staff evaluation, he repeated. The last page carried a schedule block stamped today 18-0'd. Tasting new formulation with a note in smaller type. Invite senior clinicians only. The handwriting in the margin was different from Halden's. It leaned left, precise, anonymous. His skin prickled with the shape of a warning disguised as a calendar. Someone inside sent this, Naomi said. Someone with access and a conscience or a plan. Malik glanced at the door, the motion light stilling to dark. Or a trap. Naomi kept turning pages, each one tightening something between her eyebrows. Either way, she said, voice going quiet. This contradicts every word they fed the donors. A small note fell from between the pages and skated across the steel to Malik's wrist. Just a torn scrap with a printed footer that read Vance Reserve Gate, and in pen above it, 4 hurried words. You didn't see everything. The scrap of paper lay like a dare on the steel table. Its 4 words. You didn't see everything. Inked with the urgency of a hand that hadn't wanted to be recognized. Malik turned it over, half expecting more. But the back was clean. Naomi leaned closer, brow furrowed. This isn't random, she said. It's a trailhead. Before Malik could answer, he noticed something taped flat against the inside of the dosing log's back cover. A micro SD card, nearly invisible against the cardboard. Naomi snapped on gloves and eased it free. Not the kind of thing you drop by accident, she murmured. She slid it into a scrubbed laptop, air-gapped from the internet. A folder appeared, labeled Internal Do Not Forward. Inside, a string of subfolders, named for dates, each containing PDFs, scans, and chains of emails. The first email Malik opened was between Halden and a vendor contact. The subject line read, Adverse Response Batches. Halden's note was curt. Datasets must remain internal. Reporting externally will raise liability. Label as non-clinical dietary reactions. Naomi leaned in, eyes tightening. That language is surgical. It downgrades adverse events into trivia. That's how they bury people in footnotes. They scrolled further. Attached tables, detailed patients who had shown inflammatory flares, microvascular constriction, arrhythmias. Everyone had been marked non-clinical. The correspondence looped back to the same company name, buried at the bottom of invoices, Solarace Nutraceutical. Naomi froze, color draining from her face. That's the vendor, she whispered. That's the one from my case. Malik looked at her. The one that cost you Westlake. She nodded, jaw tight. They introduced a new carrier oil for immunomodulators. It triggered cascades in certain demographics. Disproportionately, Black and Latino patients. I flagged it. Solarace called it noise. Westlake called it a partnership. When I wouldn't retract, they called me volatile. The word hung there. Bitter with memory. Malik opened another email thread. Halden again. Solarace B32 lot performed as expected. Suggest we keep it restricted to donor demos. Do not include in public-facing summaries. Vance requests discretion. Naomi tapped the screen. B32, that's the same batch in these dosing logs. They were testing it on staff, not just Sterling. The implications spooled out like a snare tightening. Then this isn't one man's illness, Malik said. It's systemic. They're running experiments in the shadows. Naomi folded her arms, and using prestige as a firewall. Malik sifted further through the files. One PDF froze him in place. A scanned photo, grainy black and white. A hospital corridor in the 1970s. A surgeon striding confidently. Behind him, 2 black porters blurred in motion. Pushing equipment, Malik recognized it instantly. It was the same photograph framed in Vance's gallery. But this scan had names typed at the bottom. One name, Harold Rhodes. Transport. His throat constricted. That's my grandfather. Naomi looked sharply at him, then at the page. You're sure? Malik traced the blurred figure with his finger. He worked nights at St. Mary's. My mother said he filed complaints about sanitation lines. Said he caught contamination that could have killed patients. He never got credit. He was told to keep quiet. The scan's caption confirmed it. Harold Rhodes filed incident report. Corrected line contamination prevented outbreak. Credit assigned to Dr. Langley. Malik's stomach turned. The surgeon in the photo, the one immortalized in the glossy gallery, had taken the credit. His grandfather had been written out, literally blurred into the background. "This isn't just about me," Malik said quietly. "This is about every Rhodes they buried." Naomi set a hand on his notebook. "Legacy isn't always inheritance. Sometimes it's a ledger. You're balancing what they overdrew." Malik thought of Patrice's raw hands, of Zora's open door, of the notebook with "Prepare the check" scrawled on its cover. His grandfather had been erased by omission. Malik was being erased by design. Both were resistance stories pressed into margins. They scrolled deeper. Another chain of emails showed Halden instructing staff to redact response data before presentations. For external slide decks, omit correlation between B32 and constriction. Use language. "Well tolerated." Naomi hissed. Well tolerated means someone tolerated it until they didn't. It's code for ignore the dead. The more they read, the clearer the pattern became. Vance's private physician cohort wasn't careless. They were complicit. The logs tracked not only Sterling's doses, but staff tastings scheduled like wine flights. Each entry signed by initials Malik, couldn't decipher, all neatly checked off. The liability extended beyond the billionaire. They had all drunk from the same poisoned chalice, confident in their insulation, but paranoia seeps where certainty leaks. The last folder held security briefings. Staff noted increasing unease, concerns about transparency, fear of external scrutiny. One line jumped out at Malik: "Prepare messaging in case of coordinated illness event." As if on cue, Naomi's phone buzzed. A call from Carol at the clinic. Her voice was taut. "3 of Vance's doctors came in this evening," she said. "Severe GI distress, vascular issues. They all admitted they'd been at a private tasting. Same menu Sterling uses. We stabilized them, but it's ugly." Naomi's eyes went wide. 3? Yes. Senior doctors. All from his team. Carol lowered her voice. "They said not to report. They begged. But this is already bigger than them." Malik's pulse kicked hard in his throat. The files, the photo of his grandfather, the sick doctors. It wasn't theory anymore. It was proof with bodies attached. Proof that could burn the facade. Naomi whispered. "The walls are cracking." Malik scrolled back to the last email in the folder. A single line from Halden to Vance. Sent just 2 nights earlier. "If others fall ill, the boy must take the blame." Malik read the email again, each word cutting deeper. "If others fall ill, the boy must take the blame." The plan was as old as America. Shift the cost of power's mistakes onto the body least likely to be believed. He felt heat behind his eyes, not tears but pressure, the kind that warned a flood if he lost focus. Naomi's hand touched his shoulder, grounding him. "They're preparing the narrative," she said, "which means they know they're losing control of the facts." Malik forced a breath, then another. He turned back to the dosing logs, the data swimming like coded ghosts. It wasn't chaos, it was pattern. And pattern was what he had always known how to see. He pulled his battered notebook across the table, flipped past pages inked with old formulas, and began sketching. The flares weren't random. The constriction cycles, lined perfectly, with ingestion of emulsifiers. Specifically one used to enhance absorption in Solary's products. Add the beta-agonist stimulant from the next-gen delivery bottles. And the load spiked vascular strain to dangerous levels. What the official reports called noise was in fact a signal, but the signal wasn't universal. It hit hardest in a genetic subset, patients whose microvascular walls already showed low resilience, often correlated with ancestry from populations historically excluded from trial cohorts. "No one asked the right question," Malik said quietly, more to himself than to Naomi. "Not what works generally, what works for whom." Naomi leaned over, scanning his sketch of looping arcs and time-stamped dots. That's why it slipped past the panels. Their cohorts were too homogeneous. They only see what their mirror shows them. Malik circled the pattern. Sterling's tremors aren't just degeneration. They're triggered, stack on stack, blend on blend. He's not just ill, he's being poisoned by his own prestige. Naomi nodded slowly. "So what's the path?" He drew 3 steps. 1. Strip the blends. Eliminate emulsifiers systematically. 2. Reintroduce one by one, under controlled observation, until the trigger isolates. 3. Microdose vascular modulator, as adjunct, alongside anti-inflammatory support. Safe, reversible, documented. And the ethics? Naomi pressed. He slid the consent forms across the table, the ones refined by the barbershop IRB. Informed consent, full stop, neutral oversight, every step public ledger, backup team with authority to override me. Naomi studied him for a long moment. You're drawing the line. Not them. I won't be a prop, Malik said. Not for donors, not for Vance, not even for the story. She set her pen down. Then the next question is whether he'll sign consent. Men like him don't like handing their body over to anyone else's pen. Malik closed his notebook. Then he'll have to decide if he wants to live more than he wants control. They drafted the protocol in detail that night. Naomi typed while Malik paced, dictating each clause. Observation intervals. 15 minutes pre- and post-ingestion. Stop criteria. Tremor escalation above baseline plus constriction exceeding threshold. Adjunct. 0.2 MICCHU. Neurovascular modulator. Reversible. Anti-inflammatory adjunct. Turmeric-derived compound. Safe at microdose. Every clause ended with consent required. When the document was done, Naomi read it aloud like scripture. Transparency clause. All steps logged in real time to independent server. Oversight required by neutral parties. Failure to comply voids protocol. Print 3 copies, Malik said. One for us, one for him, one for whoever thinks truth is optional. The next morning, Naomi arranged a call with Vance's office. Ava appeared on screen, flawless even through a pixelated connection. You've been busy, she said, voice syrupy. Drafting, documenting, conspiring. Some might call that ambition. Some might call it safety, Malik replied. Ava skimmed the PDF. You expect Sterling to agree to this much oversight? He agrees or it doesn't happen, Malik said. Halden leaned into frame then, his smile polished but eyes sharp. This isn't a game of leverage, boy. We're talking about a man's health. Malik held his gaze. Exactly. Which is why the protocol matters. The silence stretched, Ava breaking it with her PR rhythm. We'll review internally and respond. In the meantime, I'd advise against making bold claims publicly. People confuse confidence with arrogance. People confuse power with truth, Malik said and cut the call. Hours later, his phone lit with a notification. Sterling Vance seated in a leather armchair, on a live-streamed interview with a financial news anchor. The chyron read, Vance addresses health rumors. I admire enthusiasm, Sterling said, smile calibrated to camera. But science isn't built on youthful passion alone. It requires rigor, resources, context. What we witnessed at the gala was audacity, not expertise, a pretender's theater. I will always support bright minds. But let's be clear. Healthcare isn't a hobby. The anchor nodded, feeding him softballs. So you don't put weight on his claims? Sterling chuckled, as though the idea were absurd. He's a clever boy with a gift for spectacle. But curing me? That's not science. That's fantasy. The clip ricocheted across the internet within minutes. Hashtag sprouted. Darn pretender boy. Check your check. Vance vision. Malik's face frozen mid-sentence from the gala was pasted on memes. Half praising, half mocking. Venture bros posted threads dissecting his overconfidence. Comment sections filled with coded venom. He talks well for where he's from. Affirmative action in a suit. Smart kids should know their lane. Naomi found him in the warehouse, watching the flood. He's setting the stage, she said. So when you succeed, he can say he made you. And when you fail, he can say he warned us. Malik didn't look away from the screen. Then he just doubled the stakes. The interview ended with Vance leaning close to the camera, eyes glinting. $1 million was a joke. But if he insists on trying, let's make it real, public, monitored and final. I'll let him test me on record. And when he fails, the world will see it live. The clip of Sterling Vance dismissing Malik as a pretender didn't just spread, it detonated. Within hours, news outlets replayed the soundbite on loop, framing the conflict as if it were a prize fight. On one side, the billionaire visionary with an empire of glass towers and patent. On the other, a teenage upstart in a thrift store suit, wielding nothing but conviction and a battered notebook. Morning shows leaned into it. One host, all teeth and polish, chuckled at a split screen of Vance's estate beside Malik's cramped apartment. David versus Goliath, she declared. But maybe David's stone is just enthusiasm. Another host cut in. Or maybe the boy's in over his head. Health is serious business. Dreams don't cure disease. The late-night comedians were sharper, crueler. One monologue ran a clip of Malik, saying prepare the check, then overlaid it with cash register sounds and canned laughter. The audience roared. Kid thinks curing a billionaire's body is like fixing a broken iPhone. The comedian joked. Adorable. The line trended within minutes. Comment sections filled with venom disguised as debate. Smart, but unpolished. Needs a mentor who understands culture. He talks well, but where's the pedigree? Southside Science. Is that like YouTube University? The words were coded, but the meaning was clear. Race and class were the unspoken verdict. Malik wasn't dismissed for lack of evidence. He was dismissed for daring to show up without their permission. At the same time, a parallel current surged. Clips of his calm defiance at the gala inspired hashtags of their own. Prepare the check. Science from the ground up. Roads not roadblocks. Teachers played his speech in classroom. Community organizers called him proof that brilliance lived outside ivy-covered walls. Strangers flooded his inbox with stories of their own rejections, their own erasures. Malik was ridiculed and worshipped in equal measure, the line between meme and movement growing thinner by the hour. Ava Whitmore seized the moment with surgical precision. On a primetime interview, she framed Sterling as benevolent. Mr. Vance has always been a patron of young minds, she purred. He believes in second chances. This is not a fight. It's mentorship misunderstood. Malik is passionate, but passion must be guided. Sterling is offering him the opportunity of a lifetime. Imagine what this boy could become if he embraced guidance instead of spectacle. The anchor nodded, spoon-feeding the line. So you don't see him as a threat? Threat? Ava laughed. Practiced and perfect. Of course not. He's a teenager. Brilliant, yes, but also naive. Fame can be intoxicating. Sterling doesn't want to crush him. He wants to protect him from himself. The headline that night read, Vance the Mentor, Teen Scientist in Need of Direction. The framing was complete. Malik wasn't an innovator. He was a wayward child. Malik refused to be defined by their narrative. That week, he released the raw footage Cam had given him. Unedited clips of the gala, his full explanation, and the data he'd logged since. He uploaded his lab notebook in real time to an open server, complete with chain of custody notes and timestamps. He live-streamed briefings from Naomi's warehouse, inviting neighborhood nurses and local journalists to sit in and ask questions. If they call me spectacle, he said on camera, let's make transparency the spectacle. The response was electric. Teachers downloaded his notebook as a resource. Independent scientists began replicating his microassay with salvaged equipment. Hashtags shifted again. Open source science and no gatekeepers. But transparency came with cost. Sponsors who had once backed Naomi called her a liability. One sent a letter to her landlord, citing risk exposure. Within a week, her lease renewal was denied. A quiet eviction notice followed. 30 days to vacate. Pressure tactics, Naomi muttered, crumpling the letter. They're trying to starve us out. Malik's jaw clenched. They can close doors, but they can't close truth. They can close roofs, Naomi countered. And roofs matter when the work is delicate. Offers poured in from networks eager to capitalize. One cable show invited Malik to debate, Sterling live. The producer's email dripped with flattery. The people want to see you stand your ground. This is your moment. Naomi scanned it, then looked at him sharply. They don't want your science. They want you humiliated on cue. Malik shook his head. I won't be their entertainment. Not for a check. Not for clicks. He deleted the invitation. The refusals made him a target. Editorials accused him of hiding, of ducking scrutiny. Anonymous accounts leaked photos of his apartment building, mocking the peeling paint and rusted railings. It's your genius lab? One caption sneered. Another showed Patrice on her way to work in her scrubs. The caption reading, Future millionaire still lives with mom. Through it all, Malik held the line. The work is the only reply, he told Naomi. Data louder than insults. But Sterling wasn't finished. One evening, as Malik packed reagents into labeled vials, Naomi appeared with her phone in hand. You need to see this. On the screen, Sterling Vance, at a podium, flanked by Halden and Ava. Banners of Vance Reserve Medical behind them. Cameras flashed like fireworks. Sterling's voice filled the room, calm and commanding. I've heard the noise, he said. I've heard the accusations, the bravado, the spectacle. I don't fear scrutiny. I welcome it. That is why I am raising the stakes. 1 week from today, Mr. Rhodes will have his chance to prove himself. Live, timed, and under corporate oversight. Monitored by independent observers. Streamed for the world to see. If he succeeds, he wins his million. If he fails, the world will finally see truth. Reporters shouted questions. Sterling held up a hand. This is not about ego. It is about science. Science deserves clarity, and clarity will come on my stage. The clip cut back to the anchor desk. The chyron flashing. Vance challenges, teen to live proof. Naomi muttered, he just built the gallows, and offered you the rope. Malik stared at the screen, his reflection ghosting across it. For a moment he thought of Harold Rhodes blurred into a photo, of Zora's open door, of Patrice's hands raw with work. The ledger was clear. This wasn't about proving a cure. It was about surviving the gauntlet of a system that had never intended him to stand this tall. Malik's phone buzzed with a single new message. No sender ID. It read, the test will be fixed. They will tamper. If you still step on that stage, bring your own witness. The anonymous warning replayed in Malik's mind all week. The test will be fixed. Bring your own witness. He tightened his process, double-sealed every vial, and logged chain of custody with a pen that pressed grooves into paper. Naomi rehearsed the protocol with him again and again, her voice clipped and precise, like muscle memory for honesty. They thought they were ready. But betrayal never comes from the obvious door. It slips through the one left open by trust. The volunteer was named Devon. 20, wiry, bright-eyed. He had joined Malik's circle, months earlier, saying he wanted to learn science that mattered. He swept floors, fetched supplies, even ran errands to the clinic. Malik had vouched for him when Naomi questioned his eagerness. He reminds me of me, Malik had said. Someone who just needs a chance. The night before the live event, Devon offered to help prep. He labeled vials with steady hands, checked off forms with quick strokes. Malik, exhausted, accepted the help. But while Malik recalibrated his LED strip, Devon swapped 2 reagent bottles, identical caps, identical labels, contents quietly switched. He tucked a decoy intake form into the stack. Same font, different wording. A subtle alteration designed to void consent later. He sealed the box with neat tape, chain of custody logged under his initials. The stage the next morning was pure theater. A grand ballroom converted into a lab set, donors and media seated in velvet rows. Cameras ringed the platform, each lens waiting to catch failure. Vance arrived last, flanked by Ava and Halden, his suit immaculate, his smile rehearsed. He shook Malik's hand before cameras with exaggerated warmth, whispering so only Malik heard, "Enjoy your curtain call." The demonstration began. Malik centered himself, voice steady as he read the protocol aloud. Baseline first, staged elimination, transparent intervals. Every step mirrored the documents they had filed. Naomi nodded from the side, Cam recording discreetly from the crowd. But the sabotage unfolded quietly. The swapped reagent failed to react as expected. Malik repeated the assay, frowning, double-checking every step. The mislabeled control produced contradictory results, data flattening where it should have flared. Holden leaned into his mic, voice calm and cutting. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, nothing happens. Audacity is not evidence." The donors chuckled, reassured. Cameras zoomed on Malik's furrowed brow, capturing the image of a boy out of depth. Ava whispered into her tablet, feeding soundbites to the press in real time. He had his chance, one outlet tweeted, before the demonstration even ended. Malik persisted. He recalibrated, repeated, logged every motion, but optics drowned reality. The monitors showed flat graphs, courtesy of the rigged reagents. The audience saw failure. By the time he announced the need to halt, due to inconsistency, Halden seized the microphone. "This is why institutions matter," he said smoothly. "Passion cannot replace rigor. Enthusiasm cannot cure illness." Applause followed, not for Malik, but for Halden's sermon. Within hours, headlines crystallized the narrative. Pretender exposed. $1 million boy fails to deliver. Memes spread like oil fires. Clips of Malik frowning beside graphs labeled flatline, spliced with laughing soundtracks. Commentators sneered that he had been all talk. Some called it a hustle, others a stunt. The clinic that once championed him released a cautious statement. "We appreciate young Mr. Rhodes' passion, but cannot risk association with unverified claims." Donations slowed, Partners backed away. Even the barbershop circle fielded calls from city regulators, hinting that their informal oversight might be construed as unauthorized clinical work. At the warehouse, Naomi paced like a caged storm. "This was sabotage," she said. "I know it. Controls don't contradict without help." Malik sat still, eyes on his notebook. "But I can't prove it yet. And if I say sabotage without proof, they'll make me the paranoid boy who cried wolf." Naomi slammed a file shut. "So what? Let them write your story." He looked up at her, voice steady despite the fracture inside. "I'll take the blame. Deader me than the clinic. Deader me than the barbershop. They can't punish everyone if I carry it." Naomi's eyes burned, but she didn't argue. She knew the math. That night, Malik live streamed from the warehouse, his face tired but resolute. "A demonstration failed," he said plainly. "I take responsibility. That doesn't erase the truth I've seen. Science is process, not theater. Sometimes it breaks. But I will not stop documenting. I will not stop looking. And I will not stop asking who benefits when failure is celebrated." Comments flooded in: mockery, pity, admiration. A few scientists noted the inconsistencies, but their voices drowned in the roar of ridicule. Malik closed the stream, sat in the dark, and pressed his forehead to the notebook's spine. The words "prepare the check" felt less like a challenge now, more like a lifeline he refused to drop. 2 days later, Naomi was combing through the chain of custody logs when she froze. One segment was missing, a 30-minute gap between reagent delivery and storage. Initials recorded, but no signature. "That's not possible," she muttered. "Every handoff is supposed to be signed." She pulled the paper closer, tracing the handwriting. The initials belonged to Devon. Malik looked up sharply. He was here. He sealed the box. Naomi flipped open a separate file. Financial records. Cam had slipped them from an internal leak. A transaction stood out. A wire transfer to Devon's bank account, routed through a shell consultancy but tagged in the metadata. The source: Ava Whitmore. Discretionary budget. Naomi's voice dropped. "He sold us." Malik felt the room tilt. Betrayal heavier than any headline. Devon, the boy he'd vouched for, defended, trusted, had carried the knife. He tasted iron in his mouth, not from blood, but from rage, pressed into silence. Naomi shoved the paper toward him. "It wasn't just sabotage, it was purchased, and now we know who paid." The discovery of Devon's betrayal cracked something in Malik that headlines and mockery never had. Sabotage was cruel enough, but betrayal with a price tag, purchased by Ava's discretionary budget, made it feel like the walls had hands. He sat in silence long after Naomi's words faded, staring at the ledger, the missing signatures, the wire transfer line glowing like a wound. The world did not wait for him to recover. Funding that had trickled in from sympathetic donors dried overnight. The community clinic, already under pressure, called Patrice at the nursing home, politely requesting she distance herself from Malik's work. "We can't risk losing our grant," the administrator said, voice heavy with false kindness. Patrice came home that night with her shoulders sagging, her hands raw from bleach. "They're talking about cutting my shifts," she admitted, eyes refusing to meet his. "They said it's about budgets, but we know what it's about." Zora bristled. "They're punishing you for him." "For us," Patrice corrected softly. "Always for us." The final blow came when Malik returned to the warehouse to find the lock forced, glass shattered, and his equipment vandalized. Vials smashed, notes scattered, incubators kicked until their shells caved in. Spray paint scrawled across the back wall read, "Stick to your lane." He stood in the wreckage, chest hollow, rage hot under his ribs, but trapped with nowhere to go. Naomi picked up one of the broken vials, shook her head. "This wasn't random. They wanted you to know you're watched. They wanted you to stop." Malik swallowed the ache and bent down, gathering shards of glass with bare hands until Naomi pulled them away. "Let me," he whispered. "I need to feel the pieces." Word spread, as word always does. The vandalism, the headlines, Patrice's threatened job. It was too much weight for one boy to carry alone. That's when Pastor Leon Briggs appeared at the warehouse, a man built of broad shoulders and quiet conviction. He walked through the broken glass, set a thermos of coffee on the ruined table, and said, "They can break walls. They can't break people." He clapped Malik's shoulder. "Come to the church. We've got a hall we use for coat drives. It's yours now. Extension cords, folding tables, whatever you need." Neighbors followed his lead. The barbers hauled in spare chairs. The deli owner donated an old fridge. Nurses brought extension cords coiled like ropes, urns of coffee steaming through the night. What had been a warehouse of exile became a church basement of defiance. "This is enough?" Naomi asked, as they arranged salvaged equipment.
"It has to be," Malik said.
Sliding his notebook onto the makeshift bench. "It's what my grandfather had. His hands, his eyes, his will. They wrote him out of history. I won't let them do it twice." The rebuilding was slow, meticulous. Malik redrafted every lost observation from memory, filling page after page until his wrist cramped. Zora, silent and fierce, set up her laptop in the corner and began building a data mirror, backing up every new file on 2 drives, one hidden at home, another stashed with Pastor Leah. "They can erase you once," she muttered, fingers flying across the keys. "Not twice." Naomi drilled Malik on chain of custody until it felt like catechism. Every vial, every step, every signature. Courtroom grade, Rhodes. Imagine hostile lawyers breathing down your neck and still trusting your pen. They rehearsed scenarios, mislabeled vials, swapped controls, missing pages. Each time Malik corrected, signed, logged, his movements crisp with the clarity of someone who had learned the cost of leniency. The community became his witnesses. One evening, Carol and Luz, the nurses who had once edited his consent forms, brought binders. Inside were patient notes, charts, complaints that had gone nowhere. "They told us these were anomalies," Carol said. "We knew better. They called it dietary noise." Luz opened a page and slid it toward him. "That's B32. Same batch in your logs." Word rippled further. A retired teacher brought medical records showing her late husband's sudden vascular failure after a supplement trial. A college student described her migraines worsening after taking next-gen delivery blends. An EMT quietly handed over photocopied incident reports, redacted names replaced by trembling black boxes. "These aren't stories," Naomi whispered. "They're evidence." Through it all, Malik carried the grief of betrayal, like a stone in his chest. Sometimes he replayed Devon's laughter, his eagerness to help, his steady hand writing labels. "He reminded me of me," Malik confessed to Zora one night. Voice break. Zora's reply was sharp, protective. "Then they paid him to remind you of failure. Don't let that be the end of your story." He closed his notebook gently. "It won't." The news cycle had moved on, but whispers persisted. The warehouse raid hadn't been reported, but everyone knew who had silenced it. The church basement hummed with a different kind of authority. Not institutional prestige, but the weight of lives stitched together by necessity. Malik felt it every time someone dropped off sandwiches, every time a neighbor lingered to watch him log data, as if their presence mattered. And it did. He wasn't just rebuilding a lab, he was building a ledger too heavy to be ignored. It was late one night when the knock came. Malik opened the church door to find a courier in a gray suit, envelope in hand. "Rhodes?" the man asked. Malik nodded. "Consider yourself served." Inside the envelope was a subpoena, official seal, case number, language blunt as a hammer. "Malik Rhodes is hereby ordered to testify before the State Board of Health and Safety regarding investigatory hearings into Solaris Nutraceuticals and affiliated medical staff." Naomi scanned the pages, her face taut. "They're calling you as a witness. Under..." Malik gripped the paper, heart hammering. This was no longer about experiments in basements or donor theatrics. This was a hearing that could drag Halden and Solaris into the light. As he turned the page, his eyes froze on the witness list. Among the names already scheduled to testify was Ava Whitmore. The subpoena felt like both an anchor and a key. Malik had known his work was real, that the sabotage had been deliberate. But knowing and proving were two different worlds. Now inside the sterile chamber of the State Board of Health and Safety, proof wasn't optional. It was survival. The hearing room was designed for intimidation. Rows of officials sat elevated on a curved dais, their nameplates gleaming under fluorescent light. Journalists clustered at the back, pens scratching, cameras humming. The air smelled faintly of paper and nerves. Malik sat at the witness table, notebook open, Naomi at his side. She wore her lab coat like armor. The first questions came soft but cutting. "Mr. Rhodes," one board member asked, "you're not formally accredited. What qualifies you to make these claims?" Malik's hand hovered over his notebook. Before he spoke, "The data qualifies me. Every measurement, Every timestamp, every observation logged under chain of custody. He slid a binder forward. You'll find no missing segments. Every handoff, every signature, that's my credential. The room murmured. Naomi added, steady as stone. His documentation is more rigorous than half the labs I reviewed during my tenure. If you want courtroom grade, this is it. Piece by piece, the evidence was laid out. Kitchen logs from Vance's estate, showing restricted menus laced with Solari's products. Supplement sourcing contracts tying Halden directly to bulk shipments of the emulsifier-laced blends. The anonymous dosing records, their metadata matching internal systems. And finally, the wire trail Naomi had uncovered. The transfer from Ava Whitmore's discretionary fund to Devon. Each page landed like a hammer. Halden sat stiff in the audience, jaw clenched. Ava beside him, expression cool but eyes flickering whenever a new document appeared. One board member squinted at the contracts. Dr. Halden, why were these products labeled as donor-facing when staff logs show internal consumption? Halden shifted, his voice smooth but cracking at the edges. Clerical oversight. Nothing more. Malik leaned into the mic. Oversight doesn't create tremor cycles. Oversight doesn't put 3 doctors in urgent care. Then came the words Malik had waited years to hear spoken aloud. Words buried in euphemism now dragged into the open. A board attorney read directly from an internal memo. Community researchers pose liability due to cultural mismatch and lack of polish. Access to datasets should remain restricted. The silence was sharp. One official cleared her throat. So when you said liability, you meant race, class, and status. Malik answered before Halden could. They meant me. They meant people like me. It was not shouted. It was calm, undeniable. The reporters scribbled furiously. The turning point came unexpectedly. A new witness was called, Camila Hart, an investigative journalist embedded with Vance's PR team. Ava's head snapped up in shock as Camila took the stand, clutching a folder thick with notes. I was hired to craft narratives, Camila began. But I couldn't ignore what I saw. I watched Dr. Halden instruct staff to alter charts. I watched Ava spin language to discredit Malik before he even set foot on stage. I have emails. I have recordings. The folder hit the table with a thud. Ava shot to her feet. This is outrageous. The chairwoman's gavel cracked. Sit down, Miss Whitmore. Camila continued, voice unshaken. The boy wasn't a fraud. The fraud was staged around him. By the afternoon recess, the tide had shifted. Regulators conferred in low voices, faces grim. When the session resumed, the chairwoman read the interim ruling. Effective immediately, Solari's Nutraceuticals is suspended from active distribution pending investigation. Dr. Halden, you are placed under disciplinary review with full restrictions on practice until resolution. A ripple ran through the room. For the first time, Malik felt the balance tip, not toward victory, but toward recognition. The truth wasn't buried anymore. It was documented, on record, sworn. Naomi leaned toward him, whispering, You cracked the dam. He nodded, though his hands trembled under the table. But the water hasn't reached him yet. His eyes flicked to Sterling Vance, seated at the far end of the room, watching everything with a smile too calm for a man whose empire was unraveling. The chairwoman tapped her papers. Final matter, Resolution 47B. Given conflicting accounts, and in the interest of clarity, this panel orders a supervised, independent rerun of the Rhodes Protocol. Subject, Sterling Vance. Monitored by third-party physicians, with full chain of custody. Results to be logged in real time and streamed to the record. Gasps filled the chamber. Vance finally shifted, his calm smile slipping. Malik's pulse thundered. He had expected recognition, maybe accountability, but not this. Not an order to repeat the very trial they had sabotaged. Only now with the world watching. The chairwoman's gavel fell. Mr. Rhodes, prepare your notebook. The test will commence within 72 hours. The ruling spread across news networks like wildfire. State orders independent protocol on Vance. For days, speculation buzzed louder than the markets. Was this a stunt? A humiliation ritual? A genuine test? For Malik it was neither. It was a line in history, and he knew it had to be crossed with no margin for error. 72 hours later, the stage was set again. But this time, it wasn't Sterling's ballroom. The board had commandeered a teaching hospital auditorium, stripped of luxury, filled instead with sterile lighting and neutral observers. Every vial, every paper, every clock on the wall bore seals marked chain of custody verified. Malik stood at the table, his battered notebook beside him. Naomi adjusted her glasses, whispering, "Remember steady hands, steady words." He nodded. Truth doesn't shake. Across the room, Sterling Vance sat flanked by two lawyers, his jaw rigid. Cameras rolled in unblinking silence. The protocol began. Baseline measurements were logged first. Elevated inflammatory markers, tremor intervals charted, gait instability noted. Independent physicians recorded each data point aloud, their voices echoing across the hall like scripture. Malik waited until the last pen stroke before lifting the first vial. Step 1. Staged elimination. The emulsifier-rich supplements were removed from Sterling's intake. A 24-hour monitoring period followed. By the 16th hour, the tremors dulled from violent spasms to subtle twitches. Monitors caught the change, documented in real time. Marker decline at 12%, one observer read. Naomi whispered under her breath. They can't spin the numbers. The numbers are here. Step 2. Controlled reintroduction. Under supervision, one supplement was added back. The vascular constriction spiked. Tremors surged. The graphs drew jagged lines across the monitors. Cycle restored, a physician intoned. Step 3. Elimination again. Followed by the adjunct. Malik prepared the microdose vascular modulator. Every movement slow, logged, mirrored by neutral staff. When it entered Sterling's system, the monitors told a story no headline could bury. Inflammation dropped. Tremor cycles shrank. Gait steadied. By the 72nd hour, Sterling Vance, once mocked as beyond help, once framed as a stage for ridicule, walked across the floor with a clarity that silenced the entire room. The same cameras that once caught Malik in awkward frames now lingered on the graphs, on Sterling's hand steadying as he signed confirmation sheets, on the comparison footage replayed side by side, before and after, decline and stabilization, ridicule and proof. It was not spectacle. It was science, naked and unspun. A hush fell when Malik stepped to the mic. His voice cracked but held steady. This was not my cure. This was the work of every hand that carried this notebook forward. From my grandfather, Harold Rhodes, who flagged what others buried, to my mother who carried patience on her back, to my sister who mirrored every bite, to Naomi who refused to let truth die, and to the community who gave us their stories when no one else listened. This was not me. This was us, reporters scribbled. Lenses zoomed, but Malik's gaze stayed fixed on the notebook. He refused to stand alone in the spotlight. The public mood turned like a tide. Editorials that once mocked now scrambled to reframe. Teen scientist proves system wrong. Grassroots protocol outpaces big money medicine. Halden's allies fell silent. Donors rushed to distance themselves, and contracts evaporated from Solaris in real time. Offers rolled in like bribes disguised as opportunity. Corporations dangled funding, lab space, entire research wings. If Malik agreed to exclusive partnerships, Naomi laid the offers out across the church table, raising an eyebrow. They're dangling gold. Do we bite? Malik shook his head. Every condition ties the cure to a gate, and we've spent too long breaking gates. He tapped his notebook. This stays open. The climax came not with applause but with paper. Before cameras, Sterling Vance was handed a check already drafted. The amount bold 1,000. Under the weight of the board's order, under the eyes of regulators and the press, Sterling signed. The pen scraped slow across the page, his expression unreadable. Cameras zoomed in as the ink dried, as Malik accepted the envelope with steady hands. The room erupted in flashes, headlines already forming. Malik's name trended not as ridicule, but as reckoning. But Malik saw something others missed. As Sterling's hand withdrew, his eyes locked on Malik's. Not with gratitude, not with defeat, but with a cold calculation. A warning wrapped in silence. The cameras caught the pen, the paper, the smile. They did not catch the frost in Sterling's gaze, the unspoken message. This fight isn't finished. Malik left the stage with the check in his hand, but the weight of Vance's stare pressed heavier than the $1 million ever could. The $1 million check sat on Malik's desk for 2 days before he touched it again. It wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder of how low a billionaire had stooped to make a mockery of him, a reminder of how many cameras had waited for him to fail, a reminder that money changed nothing about the system that had allowed the bet in the first place. Atrice urged him to cash it, if only for security. Zora suggested investing it into a lab of their own. Naomi warned that money had gravity. It pulled attention, envy, and danger. Malik listened, nodded, but in his mind the choice had already been made. "This isn't mine to keep," he told them. "It was never about me." Within a week, Malik established 3 trusts. The first for the South Side clinic that had saved Zora's life during her childhood asthma crisis. The second, a scholarship fund for overlooked young researchers, those who had ideas but no pedigree, notebooks but no gatekeepers to vouch for them. And the third, his most radical move, an open independent safety database, where community researchers could log findings without fear of erasure, built from the same chain of custody standards. Naomi drilled into him. "This way," he explained at the church hall, "data won't live in vaults. It will live where the people who need it can see it." Applause rose not from investors but from nurses, pastors, barbers, and neighbors. But elsewhere, walls cracked. Vance's corporate board split into factions. Some directors whispered of Sterling's recklessness, turning a personal health struggle into a public circus, wagering against a teenager only to be exposed. Others still defended him, calling it a strategic misstep. Ava Whitmore, ever the strategist, pivoted faster than anyone. She scheduled a private meeting with Malik, arriving in a muted suit, smile tightly stitched. "You've proven yourself," she said smoothly. "The world loves a redemption arc. What if we build on this together? A joint foundation, Vance and Rhodes. Your science, our reach. We could raise billions for communities. It's bigger than grudges." Malik studied her, the pitch polished enough to shine. He shook his head. "That's not a partnership. That's laundering. My name to wash his. My work to polish his legacy. No." Ava's smile didn't falter, but her eyes cooled. "Then you'll make enemies of people who could have been allies." "I already have," Malik replied, "and I'm still standing." Instead of corporate partnerships, Malik published his protocol step-by-step, plain language, annotated with diagrams, was uploaded for free. Open source, translated by volunteers into Spanish, Tagalog, Arabic, and more. Nurses in rural clinics downloaded it. Student groups replicated it in classrooms. A public health coalition issued a statement calling it the most democratic act of medical science in a generation. Reporters asked if he worried about giving away his trade secrets. Malik answered simply, "Truth isn't a trade secret, it's a responsibility." Meanwhile, Sterling Vance retreated. He skipped board meetings, citing health recovery, though insiders whispered humiliation, cut deeper than any illness. Rumors swirled of directors plotting a coup, of investors demanding a review of every project he had touched. Ava fought to contain the collapse, granting interviews that spun Malik as a brilliant but misguided youth. Sterling had graciously elevated, but the spin didn't hold. The footage was too clear, the documents too public, the tide too far turned. Vance was no longer an untouchable genius. He was a liability. Still, Malik felt the weight. With every step forward came whispers of pushback. Anonymous threats arrived in his inbox, mocking the scholarship fund. A tabloid published photos of his mother leaving work. Captioned, "Millionaire's mom still punches the clock." Naomi warned him late one night, eyes fixed on her laptop. "They'll come for you differently now. Not through ridicule. Through law." He nodded, exhaustion thick in his chest. "Let them. We'll document that too." The warning proved prophetic. One morning, as Malik sorted through letters stacked on the church hall table, donations, thank you notes, student essays, he found a thick envelope with embossed lettering. Legal. His stomach knotted before he even slit it open. Inside, page after page of language heavy with accusation, defamation, trade secret misappropriation, unauthorized dissemination of proprietary research. The plaintiff, Vance Reserve Holding. At the bottom, Sterling Vance's name printed in black ink, cold as the stare he had given Malik the day he signed the check. Malik gripped the papers, pulse hammering in his ears. It wasn't over. It had never been over. Naomi lifted the letter from his shaking hands, scanning quickly. Her eyes darkened. "They're not just suing you, Malik. They're trying to erase everything. If they win this case, your notebook, your trust funds, even your protocol, they all disappear." The lawsuit became the next stage of the war, a courtroom, instead of a lab. But the stakes no less lethal. Malik tapped through deposition after deposition, every answer scrutinized, every page of his notebook questioned. Vance's lawyers tried to paint him as reckless, as a boy tinkering with lives. They brandished words like defamation and theft as weapons, hoping repetition would make them sound true. But Naomi's preparation held. Every chain of custody log was airtight, every signature accounted for, and when Malik's countersuit revealed the sabotage, Devon's wire transfers, Holden's emails, Ava's spin memos, the courtroom air shifted. Vance's empire, built on confidence and control, suddenly looked fragile. The judge's ruling cut deeper than anyone expected. Not only was Malik cleared, but the settlement required Vance's company to fund an independent oversight body, entirely autonomous, no branding, no naming rights. The very structure Sterling had mocked now had to be paid for by his own fortune. But Malik knew one victory didn't cure the disease. Money could paper over wounds. It couldn't heal them. So he turned the settlement into something bigger. He launched the Harold Rhodes Fellowship, named after the grandfather whose warnings had once been buried under other men's signatures. The fellowship funded underrepresented researchers, students and thinkers dismissed as unpolished or a liability. Applications poured in from across the country. High schoolers building devices in garages, nurses refining protocols in rural clinics, first-generation students mapping solutions no institution would have given them space to imagine. "This isn't charity," Malik said at the fellowship's first gathering. "This is reclamation. This is us refusing to wait for permission to save ourselves." The ripple stretched further than he had dreamed. Journalists, once complicit in reducing him to a meme, now dissected the systemic failures his case revealed. Articles ran with headlines like "The Gatekeeper's Blind Spot" and "From Basement to Boardroom, Rethinking Who Science Serves." Regulators quietly adopted parts of Malik's chain of custody framework, weaving his practices into policy. Medical schools began teaching his case study, how bias disguised as liability language had blinded institutions to obvious patterns, and how community-driven oversight had uncovered what billion-dollar labs had missed. For the first time, Malik saw proof that this wasn't a single story. It was a template. Back home, the church basement buzzed with new energy. No longer a refuge in exile, it became a hub. Community clinics set up satellite projects. Barbershops doubled as intake centers for surveys. Churches hosted pop-up labs. Data wasn't just numbers now. It was testimony, memory, survival written into charts and shared without fear of erasure. One evening, Pastor Leon walked Malik through the hall, watching volunteers work. "You didn't just rebuild a lab," he said. "You built a pipeline. And pipes don't end where they start." Through it all, Malik kept the notebook close. Pages wrinkled, corners frayed, the words "prepare the check" still carved into the cover. It wasn't arrogance. It was memory, a covenant with the boy he had been. On the day the clinic's new wing opened, funded by the trust staffed by fellowship alumni, he placed the notebook in a glass case by the entrance. Not as a trophy, not as proof of a single victory, but as a reminder. A small plaque read, "This book caught what others buried. Let it remind us. The cure was not $1 million. It was persistence. The larger disease was systemic. The cure must always be community." For a moment, Malik allowed himself quiet. Patrice stood beside him, her hand brushing his arm, whispering, "You'd be proud, your grandfather, your father, all of them. You carried what they couldn't." Zora added, fierce but smiling, "And you didn't just carry it. You built something no one can burn down." Malik exhaled, shoulders unclenching. "Not just me, all of us." The hall filled with voices, with laughter, with the hum of machines, and the shuffle of notebooks opening anew. But peace never stayed unbroken. Late one night, as Malik prepared to lock up, his phone buzzed with an encrypted email. The subject line read simply, "Urgent, help." Inside was a message from a rural hospital 3 states away. Staff described unexplained vascular flares among patients, linked to a new nutritional blend, marketed under a different brand name. Attached were photos of packaging, lab results, side effects. Malik's chest tightened as he scrolled. Different name, different logo, but the same vendor's chemical fingerprints ran through every chart. The story wasn't over. The disease was still alive, shifting shapes, changing names. Malik closed the laptop slowly, the glow reflecting in his eyes. "Prepare the check," he whispered, not to Vance this time but to the system still feeding on lives. The fight had only begun a new chapter. Stories like Malik's aren't just stories. They're mirrors of a world that too often looks away. If you believe no voice should ever be silenced because of race, type yes. If you believe in justice, and if this broke your heart, subscribe. So these truths are never buried again.